So now we have opportunity for questions and discussion, and want to encourage any question, especially from people who are new or newer, and especially if you're thinking, oh, I shouldn't ask that, that's obvious.
So for those who have a question, to be able, so that the people listening on streaming can hear your question, Nate will be the mic runner.
So, Erik, welcome back. And have you learned anything interesting about change to share with us?
Yeah. Yeah, my mom, asked me, how are you doing, Erik? And I told her, I said, I think it's too early to tell. And I remembered when I was learning to swim, like the very first day I arrived for my lesson, they threw me into the pool. And I was splashing around and didn't know how to swim. And and I reckon if you'd asked me how things were going at that point, I would have said really bad. But somewhere in there, I transitioned to being able to tread water and paddle around and at a certain point, I could swim just fine. And so I guess what I would say is I moved into a much bigger job in a lot of ways than what I was used to, at a bigger place and with higher expectations. My boss, in a lot of ways, is sort of the most kind of brilliant and high-functioning doctor in the world, and but I'm still just me. And so I feel like I'm being stretched and having to grow, and that is not comfortable, but it's also not bad. It's actually, in a lot of ways, why I went. And so for my part, though, I'm trying to kind of reserve judgment until I'm a little deeper into it. And I think the other thing that I learned, which sounds kind of obvious, but I learned about a lot of ways that I was stuck and didn't even really know it. A really simple example was, I remember when we moved into our house 13 years ago, they had this really kind of ragged carpet going up from the garage, and we were like, oh, we have to change that carpet. But lo and behold, we're selling the house, and the realtor's like, oh, you better change that carpet. And so we did, and it really helped. And we're like, what happened that we totally lost sight of that? And then I guess the other thing that I would say is it's amazing, when you do kind of take on, when everything in your life changes, it's amazing how quickly you want to try to put everything back the way it was. I think Lama Michael calls that what does he call it? Like our commitment to the causes and conditions of our own suffering.
I have a question. Yeah, I know that in your work here, one of the primary grounds for your inquiry and the way that you were stretched to go deeper was in the day-to-day meeting with people who were in whatever situation that that brought them to the medical facility and your relationship with them. What are the kind of the new opportunities for stretching and inquiry where you are, and what kinds of openings do they offer?
Well, thankfully, I still get those opportunities. I still get to see patients and work with them. And it's totally different place, different rules in Massachusetts. Lots of rules in Massachusetts, actually. But the patients and the challenges are blessedly familiar. And what I do now, my job is basically I'm the director of and kind of a shepherd for a program that tries to encourage health professionals to engage patients in conversations about what really matters to them. Difficult questions about, prognosis or time or quality of life. What are you hoping for? What are you afraid of? If it comes down to it, what are the trade-offs that you would be willing to make and not willing to make? So in my field, palliative care, we do that routinely, but what we've recognized is that there will never be enough of us to ensure that every patient that needs palliative care can see one of us. And so the direction that the field is going and the direction that my program is oriented in is how can we teach all health professionals to have these conversations at the right time and in the right way. And so the way that we approach that is we try to develop tools and training and ways of changing the healthcare system to help those conversations happen more and earlier and better. And so whereas before, I was in charge of taking care of patients and building programs that took care of patients, the opportunity now is that we're developing and spreading a program that we hope over time will just become standard of care and part of what doctors and patients and nurses and social workers and every health professional that has a hand in caring for patients with serious illness will just do routinely. And it won't require a fancy program from Harvard to get them to do it. But I guess the opportunity for me, or what I'm challenged to do now, is that well, for example, people that this time last year were sort of my heroes, or my people that I maybe idolized, now are my peers, and I have to work with them, or get to work with them. So, but that's what you learn, right? When you meet your your heroes, and indeed they are kind of super. They're extraordinary in many ways, and then they're also human, so they're also ordinary in some fairly distinctive ways, and have their own challenges and pluses and minuses. So my challenge is to figure out how to help us all work together in a way that really moves the field forward and keeps us oriented towards how can we have the greatest impact for where we are now. And I think one of the challenges in doing that is it's all sort of, it's kind of the work of imagination. So you have to imagine how both an ideal state, and then incrementally, how can you move towards that ideal state in concrete ways that allow as many people as possible to buy in and pitch in. So I guess the short answer is it's a challenge of leadership and vision, and then also of being, in my clinical role, I'm right there with patients. In my professional role now, I'm multiple steps removed. So trying to figure out how to bridge that divide in a way that's meaningful and valuable.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It occurs to me as you describe all the questions that none of them were how do you figure out which kind of chemo? So the kind of questions that I would usually think of healthcare questions, the questions that you were asking are more about life care.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a radical shift in asking healthcare to transform its own identity in a lot of ways. And so I certainly wish you luck with that. In terms of the challenges of how to do that, it sounded a lot like the challenges of trying to figure out how to articulate something about the Dharma that's meaningful in this. So, and how to maintain a vision for a community to foster that. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Erik, I had a question.
Yes.
The last time you led the teaching, you responded to a question of how to be with somebody when they're dying. And there was you referred to the fourfold way.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I only remember 3, but of being with them, listening, but saying I'm sorry, saying thank you, saying I love you. But my question today, the question that came up when I heard you were going to be teaching again, is what can we bring to somebody who has just been diagnosed and is not in the dying stage, but is serious illness or just diagnosed with terminal? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure it's actually that different. I think everybody, no matter what stage of their life they're in, appreciates being met where they are. And so I don't have to know what people need at that time in order to do that. Because if I meet them where they are, then they'll kind of tell me. And so actually the fourfold way that you referenced, I think, is about as close to sort of a set of instructions that's likely to work in most situations. I think probably nothing works in every situation. But the fourfold way, which was articulated by an anthropologist named Angeles Arian, who went around to tribal elders in North America and Central America and asked them, what is the wisdom that you have that makes you an elder in your community that people come to when they need advice? And from those interviews, she distilled it down into what she called the fourfold way, which is show up, pay attention, tell the truth without judgment or blame, and be interested, not attached to the outcome. So I think if you do show up and pay attention, and you have the intention of trying to be beneficial, and you keep that central in your mind and don't have too much of an idea about what that's going to look like, then increasingly you'll be trusted with the information about what that person needs. Yeah, it's so my boss now is Atul Gawande, and he there was a video that was sort of kind of viral of an interaction between John McCain's daughter. Senator McCain has a brain tumor and is nearing the end of his remarkable life. And Joe Biden, former Vice President Biden, who when he was early in his career in the Senate, right? He lost a son to cancer. And so Joe's been very passionate about finding the cure to cancer and the cancer moonshot. And there was this video of them together, and Joe said to, I think Meghan McCain, I think is her name, well, if anybody can beat this, it's your dad. And So Atul saw this, and he wanted to know, what could he say in a similar situation to an audience that didn't contain within it sort of the element that victory was somehow tied up in somehow beating a cancer, which, nobody knows what the future holds, but is very likely to end Senator McCain's life soon. And the answer that we came up with, I'm not sure it's perfect, but it was better than I thought we were going to come up with, which I would attribute to my mentor there. And she said, hope is good, and fighting is fine, and it's also good to remember what it is that you're fighting for, and to not forget the important ways that you want to use the time that you're fighting to buy. Yes, and back. Peter.
Thank you. How would you apply the fourfold way in a situation where someone had suddenly and unexpectedly lost a child or another loved one?
I think that if you are in that situation, what you quickly see is that one or more of the fourfold way is a particular challenge for you. In that situation, maybe it's hard to even show up. And that's what we see, right? When we have a big, when something catastrophic in our lives happens, there are people who care about us that really don't know how to relate to it or what to say, and we never really hear from them. And often it doesn't reflect not caring, although it can seem that way. It just reflects people don't know what to do. But for those who do show up, then paying attention can be a challenge. In an effort to try to make things better, or fix things or take care of people, we can inadvertently say and do things that actually get in the way. So it's good to try to come with a mind that is open to and paying attention for what might be needed. As you're listening, well, if you've been in the position of listening to another's grief or their problems or their challenges or their struggles in life, well, one of the great things about being in that position is other people's problems are much easier to see than ours are our own, right? But then it can be a challenge for how do you if you see a solution, providing it in a way in which they can really hear it can be a challenge. And you can even wonder if you should say anything. And so the instruction to tell the truth without judgment or blame means that there are truths that are really difficult to articulate without judgment. But those truths are not always helpful. And I think we sort of owe it to people to not share a truth that we know beforehand that they're not ready to hear or not open to, or in a way that makes them less open to it. Mindful of that now because I've spent the last 48 hours with my mom. I've gotten extensive coaching and truth on my parenting, my diet, my mental health, my relationship with my wife, and my work. Is that all? So far. And fortunately, my mom is open to the truth that, wow, Mom, that was a lot of advice. Can we tone it down a little bit? And then I think the last one is really the hardest one, for me anyway, which is don't be attached to the outcome. And that, I think on reflection, my mom concluded that was what she was struggling with, that she so wanted me to be well and happy and for everything to be good. And that desire was causing her to veer into without even noticing it actually, this role of trying to help and fix me, which a little bit is definitely welcome, but at a certain point it can become hard to take, which says as much about me, I think, as her. So I don't, one of the helpful and or unhelpful things about the Fourfold Way is it doesn't give you any particular advice about how to do anything in a specific situation. But part of the reason for that is because everybody is different and every situation is different. And there's almost nothing that you can say that's apt to be helpful in every single situation. But I think it's also true that, or it's not true to say that there's nothing that one can say at all. So I like the Fourfold Way as sort of a compromise. I think, I think that's all I'll say about that. Thank you for the question, Peter. Oh, hi.
Hello. Okay. I have a couple. I guess my question is twofold, and I was curious if you had any thoughts on this. One is that this year I've been holding a lot of space for my best friend who went through cancer this year, and it was this total surprise. I mean, she's a pretty healthy person, but it happens. And she actually just got the first blood test back about 2 weeks ago, saying that things are looking really good and she's clear. And so I think I'm actually more exhausted now than I was before because, it's like when you're in it, there's just, even when you're not around, even when I'm not around her, I'm thinking about her, I'm thinking about her family, I'm holding a certain sense of steadiness within myself. And I've been kind of, I don't know, wanting to express to her in an honest way, but not in a resentful way, just that was really hard for me. And I actually met with her parents, and her dad kind of said the same thing, that he's exhausted too, of course, and just wanting to be truthful, because there's no need to lie, but, wanting to deliver that in a way that, is loving. And I guess the second part is going through that really shifted me a lot, in some ways in a really transformative way, and helped me to see how frequently on a day-to-day basis I'm really in my head, or I always have these to-dos. I'm in naturopathic school, so there's always some assignment. So I think at first I thought, I have all these resources that I could share and things, and it actually ended up being that I just wanted to be hiking and doing everything I could to just feel like a present person. So a little bit the reality is that my sense of striving and drive has gone down. I kind of don't care because I just see that, it was one of those experiences where all these little day-to-day things didn't mean so much to me compared to cultivating something that was deeply internal. So.
Wow. Well, now, so what you said was just about perfect. I'm a little hesitant to add anything to it. I guess the question I would have for you is, if you imagine sharing what you just said with your friend, how do you think that would go?
I mean, I think she'd totally understand. And at one point, she kind of checked in with me to make sure that I had the right resources for myself. It just feels like kind of an odd thing to say, but we're really honest with each other with, all other topics.
Well, I don't know your friend, but I think she's pretty lucky. And having a friend who's willing to hang in there with you with a difficult illness is huge. And I don't think it'll be a surprise to her that it was difficult for you too. And hearing actually that the experience, in addition to being hard, was also a source of some blessing, seems like a really, like a jewel. So I hope you are able to have that conversation. There's a young lady who is leading a movement. She has a TED Talk. She seems way too young to be the leader for this, but maybe that's appropriate. And she calls it big talk, so as opposed to small talk. And she says as a society, we need to relearn this capacity for big talk. So that might be if you need more inspiration, that might be a place to look.
I just have a little public service announcement. I was not aware until just a few moments ago that it is freezing rain outside. The temperature is expected to go up to a whole 33 degrees, so chances are it'll be sticking around for a bit, so please do be careful when you leave.
Thank you, Miriam.
I have a friend, a very good friend, who's diagnosed with ALS and doesn't have long to live. And it's strange, but my impulse is kind of to ask this fellow, who's a very, very intelligent guy, for teaching. Like, what have you learned? What are you learning? And I'm just wondering if that isn't a little presumptuous. Do I dare to approach the fellow and just, kind of say, do you have anything to share with me that you're learning from this experience?
Well, so you can do the thought experiment in your head there. So say you just posed that question to your friend. How do you think he'll respond?
Well, that's a good point. The guy's a teacher by profession, medical school. So I think, probably to answer my own question, it would be fine. He would probably relish the opportunity, would be my guess. So I withdraw my question.
Asked and answered.
Actually, I did that once. I did that. And actually, I did that with Alan, Harriet's husband, when he'd gone through so many rounds of problems with knee surgery and a knee going in, a knee coming out, a knee going in. And I just thought that I felt quite close to him. For some reason, I just felt that way. And so I asked him, "What have you learned in this?" And he was so touched to have been asked that it was another kind of moment where I felt even more closer to him. Well, he did have an answer, but what the answer is his answer, but he did have one, and it related to being able to still have a sense of connection and doing something for others. that was actually what he'd seen in it. That was important. So, I thank him for that.
I think I sort of do this for a living. And some of the questions that may or may not be right for your friend that I've enjoyed asking people over the years are, where do you get your strength from? Do you have things that you're hoping for, or has the way that you think about hope changed in the light of this diagnosis? Are there things now that are a particular worry for you? Things that you're fearful of when you think about the future? What do you think happens when you die? And what are the things that are most important to you now? Those kind of questions. More big talk. Virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. Thank you, everyone. And also thank you. I got a wonderful gift brought to me by John Jennings. Was it just last month, John? Oh my goodness. I've lost track of time, but this wonderful book. Thank you all so much.